and I'm going to hand it over to Dave. Dave, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Interestingly enough, I am actually using a headphone right now that's battery operated, and I'm being told that the battery is low. So we're going to really test when I say, "Can you hear me?" I'm going to test to see how that works. All right. I'd like to thank you for coming, especially after lunch, and I'd like to thank Jimmy for inviting me to this. I think in the past year, especially after the pandemic, the interest in synchronous online instruction was really quite impressive. A couple things I'll point out. A lot of people sometimes want to know if they can have notes or slides or so. I have a post on my blog. If you have the QR code, you can scan it right here and put it right in your phone, and you can go along with it if you'd like. And everything I put on there is basically OER. I put in a lot of OER material, including all the slides for this presentation. So if you ever said, "Wow, this is a really horrible presentation," and you would like to share it with other people to let them know, you can post them there, or preferably say how good it is and get some people to pay attention a little bit. For the most part, I'm going to go over 5 little sections. So there's going to be 5 little breaks that we can discuss things as we go. When we're talking about the idea of leaving no one behind, having an equitable, synchronous online learning environment, I'm going to actually talk a little bit about equity, what I call the big monsters, what you can do when you're live, and somehow we should be rethinking about instruction and the value of prep. If you are a sous chef, you definitely know that. The first one we're going to talk about is equity, both pre and post pandemic. This is something that many people are probably going to recognize. We knew it's probably sad, but I'm going to go through some of the important things to note. When we suddenly did a shift to accommodate students who could not attend classes because of the pandemic, it was very stressful for everyone. However, it's something to note that it put on a lot of extra stress on those people who needed a special accommodation. For years, we did not accommodate people who needed a special accommodation. We did not offer as many online courses, and we told them we couldn't possibly afford to do these online features or to record or have these sort of video conferences. And yet the moment that it's needed for all the non-disabled students, then all of a sudden we jump to it. And that's kind of a sad statement, right? And it's something that it's always kind of hurt every time I think about it, how first we tell them that we can't, and then once we quickly move to it, I happen to recall dealing with a lot of faculty who just didn't care about accessibility because we didn't have time for it. But in fact, it only took a couple months afterwards of trying to settle after the pandemic to get things going to start really taking accessibility seriously, right? And that's something that's sort of painful that we need to really think about and move forward about, just how we can guarantee that we're going to stay accessible and we're going to accommodate people. And to do that, I don't see the technology going away anymore. We will continue to use Synchronous Online as a viable online learning platform, but we definitely need to push to make it accessible and at least consider equitable situations or equitable practices. And this is something that affects me, and I think it's going to affect everyone. We're all going back to our offices. There's been a huge push, at least at our college now, to go back to normal. And I'd like to remind people that before the pandemic, normal was normal for some, but it was terrible for a lot of people, right? Many people, when they needed video, they had to take their own video, they had to do their own transcriptions. We did things individually, but we didn't offer it en masse. And I'd like to think that the things that we've learned over the pandemic is going to be something that we will take with us. And that's where I'd like to bring up the meaning of the no man, or rather no one left behind. Does anyone know? Let's see if Jamie can say this. Does anyone know where this statue is from, or where the term leave no man behind is from?
Give them just a second to type it in if they know.
Always. We're quizzing them on this one. You can guess, there's no penalty here.
I don't see any takers though.
Okay. This is actually a statue that's in Camp Lejeune, which is a military training ground. These are a statue of, this is actually in honor of one of the soldiers who died in Afghanistan, I believe. But the leave no man behind is a mantra in the Marines and most all of our military services. We don't leave a soldier behind. And what that does is it means that as an institution, they fight for everyone. And I'd like to think that we can hopefully bring that idea into fold in education. Instead of thinking about grading or about how we can separate into these are the successful students, these are not, we should not leave anyone behind and make for a better educational environment where everyone is going to meet our learning objectives. And that might mean that we have to encourage people to work together so that we can create basically scaffolds to help with inequitable instances that are just going to happen, that we have no control over, but at least we can accommodate them, right? And in many ways, we should take the experience of the pandemic and what we've learned, and we can then sort of take that experience and use it and sort of make the not new normal, be better. So a little thing to think about before I go on too about inequities is that we took remote learning, and a lot of times we think of it as a new technology because a vast number of our faculty adopted this sort of remote learning. And does anyone know why I have an old radio here? Anyone? Okay, well, I'll just go on. Hopefully it's because my mic is not dead. But when the radio first came about, many of the ways that they used the radio was sort of new, and people didn't know what to do with this technology or medium. So a lot of the radio shows were much like vaudeville shows, but they just stuck a microphone in and recorded it and sent it out in the waves. And that is why we had a ventriloquist become a popular celebrity, and he did his ventriloquist act on the radio. How would you even know, right? But what happened is we're taking what we knew in the past and we're applying it to the new medium. And the same very thing happened once TV came about. We then took the radio shows that we knew and we just dropped it into the new medium, right? Isn't that what we kind of do when we take online learning and thinking of it synchronous? We think of, well, we always stood in front of the students and lectured at them for an hour. Now I have a camera and we'll do the exact same thing instead of actually utilizing the medium for what it's best at. And that's something we really need to think about, is that the web is a different medium, right? The web is highly dynamic, right? It's not going to be as easy as just a lecture because that's really not the best thing to just talk at someone for a long period of time. Hopefully I will not break that pattern. I will not, do what I'm saying not to do. But many have sort of ignored the delivery about how we're going to work with our students because we sort of adopted the tradition of what we learned as graduate students, right? And if you think about it, that's really not what we should be doing. So here's where I'll ask, are there any questions that I've done so far? Am I coming through clear? And notice
We can still hear you. The battery holding solid. There was a comment or question from Susan Warner that said regarding the radio, they were scared of it too, right? Or was that the telephone?
both. Just about every new technology is something that people become scared of or is different. Even if you go back to, and I know this sounds strange, you can find in old Latin and Roman writings, okay, about the moral decline because all the young kids are drinking wine with ice. And the idea that they had ice, that is the cause of all our problems, right? And the radio was the same thing. And then came, we know probably more close to, our time, since most people, didn't live in Roman times. Comic books were bad, right? And then, rock and roll, video games, anytime there's a new medium or a way that interacts with people, right? For the longest time in the 90s, it was all about being afraid of the chat rooms because your children will be taken away. It's usually some new technology is something we're scared of instead of exploring how we can use the technology for its best purpose. And part of that is also understanding how it works. And I'm going to take this moment of moving forward then to talk about what I call the two big monsters, right? Bandwidth and technological inequity, right? And these were huge factors that hurt students, and we don't think about it. And it really does show that some people who afforded better bandwidth or had access to better technology and bandwidth, they smoothly went through and rode out this pandemic. But those who didn't had other issues. It made it even harder for them to do what they managed to escape when they didn't have that, right? Here's really fascinating work that came about in 2020 from Deutsche Bank. Huge study that demonstrated that in the United States, 60% of white families have access to quality broadband, while only 30% of Black families have access, right? And when it came to owning a personal computer in households, 83% of white families had a personal computer in their household, only 60% of Black families, and only 51% of Hispanic families. So, well, we think, well, they can just stay home and do their work. You don't realize that maybe they're using the computers elsewhere, right? The main way to access the internet for many of these families that do not have access to broadband or a personal computer at home was their telephone. And that, I'm sure we recognize, is not the best way to access a learning management system, right? There just doesn't work that way. So one of the things that happened is the moment we're doing a lot of synchronous back-to-back classes and video meetings with our students, video conferencing uses copious amounts of bandwidth. And this is a serious issue. If you're in a house where you have 4 students all using bandwidth, it's going to suck your bandwidth dry. And you might not realize that they're sharing a small apartment with 3 children who are also doing work at the same time. And they somehow have to keep things together, right? So when you're going to do a synchronous session, you have to really think about this. You don't want to have in the chat, download this video or other large file, because that's just going to drive down the bandwidth even worse, right? Likewise, many platforms use a lot of resources. In particular, Teams uses 4 gigabytes of RAM. Many low-end computers only have 4 gigabytes of RAM, so that if they have to open up Word, the whole system just comes to a crawl. And it's something you don't think about, because the students who don't have lower end systems don't have that issue, right? But it's just a common issue that can happen. So we want to think about that, right? We want to be able to sort of accommodate, what if they can't open up something earlier? Could we then allow the file downloads prior to the session? And something that I'm going to say that we individually can't do, but I think is a way that we can help stop the inequality in this country, really, when it comes to this, is that we should lobby our government as an infrastructure need to have free Wi-Fi in most locations that don't have access to good broadband. If we put it in the downtown areas where many people do not have a lot of income, it will work fine for them, right? So that's just a political statement, but it's something we could say as educators is a need. All right. The other thing that I mentioned before, we want to be mobile friendly. Very important, because if we're not, well, then for all you know, that person is accessing that web conference or your class through their phone, because it's the only way they can get and only way to contact the class at that time. It might be that they're sharing the computer. There's a lot of things to think about. It's not optimal, but it's necessary for them. So think about using files too that are also mobile friendly, like PDFs. By the way, PDFs are also great for screen readers, right? So the other thing, and I like to point right here, video is optional. If you want to share your video right now in this session, it looks great. Some people see it's nice to see other people. In particular, my little screen in the corner, I can see one person looking up. I will not mention their name. Gives me the memories of the Brady Bunch opening. It probably tells you how old I am, right? But at the same time, they might not want to share that. They might have issues. They might be sharing, for example, some of us have a very, very small office they share with a spouse, and we sometimes have conflicting meetings. So we have to mute, we have to wave our hand to let each other know when to talk. And this is not unique to just myself, right? This is actually something that happens. I knew of some people who had to, in order to have a quiet environment have to go out to their car because they had two kids taking classes at the same time and they couldn't have meetings. This clearly is happening with our students. So we need to think about that. And we shouldn't think about punishing anyone for not sharing the video. You just don't know. Of course, it also sucks bandwidth. Okay, are there any questions about bandwidth or computer technology? Did anyone know that about Teams?
I think Susan mentioned rural areas
One
are
second.
also implicated by that. But that's all the
There
questions.
we go. I'm recharging my battery, so if I look very close now, don't be scared. It's distracting me. It's beeping me saying I'm dying. So how do we have any questions, Jamie?
No, I think
No?
Susan just made a comment about rural areas are impacted by low bandwidth as well. And Marge, I think, made a comment about the fear of computers replacing workers.
Yeah. I'm not sure if the computers will ever replace workers, right? People mentioned that once we started working with computers in the work environment, that printers will be gone, that we'll no longer print anything. And ironically, the amount of paper and paper that being printed doubled, right? Because it became so easy to print things, and we realized that it's easier to read paper and mark it up often than on your computer. In fact, if you have a large file, if you read that file as a PDF on your computer or you print it out and read it, you will read the printed out version 20% faster. So something to think about when you're teaching your class, right? Tell your students, if you can, you might want to print this large file out because it's just going to be easier for you to read, right? So that is definitely something. But I don't see the technology replacing us. I see that we're just should be able to learn to use the technology. And I'd like to think it's really a question of using the technology the best possible way that we can. Right. I mean, it's a lot of times people say, oh, we can't because of the technology. I think it should be that the technology augments so that we can say, oh, yeah, now we can do this as well. Right now, we're getting cases where closed captioning is just about guaranteed everywhere. And now we can download and record these videos and make these accessible to just about everyone. The amount of content is so much better than it was. And it's only because they use the technology. So I'm definitely not a Luddite in that sense. But I think it's also important how we use it. So probably the big thing that people are going to ask is, how can I make my synchronous section equitable when I'm live? Because that's really it, right? We want to know those tips, right? I just gave you some of the obvious ones and the inequity. So I definitely don't want to, do the bait and switch and not give you anything. All right. And a couple things you definitely want to do is take regular breaks to engage your students. Okay. Do notice what I've been doing, right? I like to teach through example, right? Give a little bit, let people have a chance to, talk. Ask if you can hear me. You might have to do what I did and suddenly just put yourself on a corded mic so that your battery is back. You never know. There's a lot of times there are certain issues. In particular, I've seen several instances where MS Teams is used and the image you're sharing is black. So, if you start saying, as you see in the chart and everyone's looking at a black screen, you've created this sort of anxiety. And in particular, if they have low bandwidth, then they're thinking, is it not downloading because of me, right? Or their computer, or do I need to put in a plugin? So be ready for that. Be ready for someone to might not have, the technology needed, or that something's not working on your end. And that's, I think, one of the important things. You would take little breaks and always tell people, just type it in the section, contact me one way or another. We can always work around that. I think that's the whole don't panic thing too, right? It's not that bad. Usually it's not life and death. If you just remind your students that and yourself that, you realize it's okay. Now that I'm recorded on that one, I better not panic if something goes wrong. That's where you want to be forgiving and flexible, right? So, something's going to go wrong. Just be forgiving and know that it could happen to you. It could happen to anyone. If there's radio silence, for example, when I ask, does anyone know where the statue is? It could be that absolutely no one is. Now, there could be, a bunch of people who all served in the Marines, right? And just visited Camp Lejeune and knew that that's what it was. but it isn't the case, right? So there also could be other reasons. That was just the case of maybe no one knows, or maybe people don't want to admit it, right? But there are other issues. There are technical issues. There's specific hardware issues. There's bandwidth lag. There's always something that could stop from someone responding right away. And there's also the fact that there is bandwidth lag going on right now. And if you think about it, I'm willing to bet from one hub to another of everyone listening in this Zoom session right now, we probably are covering well over 100 miles. So if we are covering over 100 miles, if there's going to be a 2 or 3 second delay, that's okay, right? It's sort of like when people are angry that the credit card machine is taking too long. It's taking more than a second and a half to process your credit card. You have to remember it's sending something to outer space back and forth, and then reaching your bank account and going back to a satellite and back to you. That's magical, right? We shouldn't then say it took 5 seconds. It's like, no, you're like the person yelling at the microwave for making the popcorn in 20 seconds instead of 15, right? It really is something that we should just give people time. So if it means there's a little bit of time, that's okay. I call it silence can be comforting. Ironically, I'm not personally like that. So when there's dead air, I'm, a million things are going through my head that something's wrong. I said something terrible and they're shocked or aghast. But you need to be patient. If you're going to do this, if you're going to do synchronous online, you're going to need to be patient for all these reasons, right? For one, it increases engagement. In fact, if you're teaching face-to-face, be patient and allow there to be a dead silence. Let the students think before they say. In fact, that's probably advice we tell children. They should always think before they say, and yet we should also hold that for the students. And there might be other issues as well. If you have arthritis in your hands, like I do, it takes time to type. And other people who have disabilities, they also take harder. It's harder for them to type or use chat sessions. You have to be able to accommodate that. While I'll take a couple seconds here and you're thinking about this, this is a beautiful astrological clock in Prague. So if you are curious of these images, I like to, toss in these things. I will also let you know that somewhere in the next few slides, there are 2 otters, so that we'll stay in sync with our session, okay? All right, so with that said, live captioning, okay? Now I have a quote here, and that quote is from someone who's not that famous, but he's talking right now. All right, so I'd like you to know that if a company will not take accessibility seriously, we should not take their products seriously. All right, so if a company is going to offer you a technology that's not accessible, like it's not offering live captions for its web conferencing software, then we should not be using it. Right now, you could use Zoom, Teams, and Google Meet, and they all have live captioning, right? It might not be the best, and it might be hilarious about the mistakes they make, particularly if English is not your first language and you're speaking English, okay? There are mistakes that happen, but we'll take that over not having any at all, or by having someone say, all you have to do is tell a student to type really fast, and they could type in what you're saying, which literally a rep said to me once, and I thought, I don't recall requiring our students to be able to transcribe. That's a job in itself, right? So we really need to take that seriously. So if you're going to do a synchronous session, that is a critical feature. Likewise, and many people don't realize it's getting better, but breakout rooms break captioning in many programs. So you may have live captions, and if you push people into breakout rooms, you might inadvertently wipe out the captioning, and that will directly affect the person who needs the captioning. So you want to make sure that you think about that when you're going to develop your sessions. If you're going to use the breakout sessions, just be ready for that. Pardon me, I'm going to try to look more human. There we go. All right, so well, how do we get around that then? Well, one way to get around that would simply be, we could provide detailed instructions, right? In the main room. Before I do a breakout session and bounce into each room to help you, maybe I could just give detailed instructions, right? Before we go there. Likewise, if you find out before that some people need the live caption, you can also allow them to continue their breakout room in the main room, right? That will still have that captioning usually. So that will at least be able to accommodate those type of things. Or you could augment a session by having the breakout sessions also utilize a shared document like Google Docs, where they can write and sort of things, send each other messages through multiple means to collaborate, right? So they're not basically hampered by one system that doesn't have a way for them to communicate. All right. The other thing you want to do is provide a narrative. You want to remind people of certain items. Imagine, if you will, that you basically were blind or have poor sight. It would be very disturbing if you just flashed up a chart and say, well, you can determine this by the chart as it shows, right? You are literally the alt tag or descriptions for your charts, graphs, and images when you're doing a live session. So you want to give the students a verbal description of what they should know or what they're seeing there, right? That'll help them immensely. It's something that, yes, it's very powerful to show images. And if you notice, I'm a big fan of loading up the screen with images to make you think. But when there's a chart, you definitely want to tell them these are the salient features of that image, right? And also avoid timed responses. One way of getting people to respond a lot in your class, you want to engage your students, is to ask questions and have them reply in the chat. That is true. Some faculty thought it'd be great to offer bonus points for those people who responded first, but that's not good. Because as I mentioned, some people have arthritis in their hands. Some people are dyslexic. Some people need assistive technology in order to even do the chat. They don't stand a chance, right, to win where the others do. So you're kind of being ableist without realizing it. Likewise, bandwidth issues and technological boundaries. From a personal experience, I know someone who was given a laptop that had very low RAM, and then when he had to do a Teams meeting, people were sort of, you know, joking about why would this person who's supposed to know technology not be able to unmute himself? When in fact they couldn't unmute himself because it was, the program was frozen, right? So you have to be aware that sometimes these things happen. If you want quick responses, you're basically being biased in one way or another. All right, I quickly sped through that a little bit. I'm going to ask this question. Can everyone hear me? We got some positive things. Okay, I always want to ask that in case, you know, I've lost some sort of internet connection and I'm just speaking to my computer embarrassingly, but I want to know that we're still there because that happens. Are there any questions about some of the things I mentioned about going live? I did miss some of the obvious ones that we'll cover a little later. I call that the prep.
I think there was just a lot of chatter about things we should consider. There's some interesting points about cultural diversity and that making a difference in people's participation, their willingness to participate, et cetera, and respecting that in our students. So,
and that is very true too. I mean, there's a huge disparity of the sort of norms that are expected culturally. I'll never forget Ram Hare was a professor from New Zealand. He was a Kiwi, right? And he mentioned when he taught in China, the workshops there, the students would always just want to get together. So he said if they were going to cheat, they wouldn't even know it, because to them, getting together and working on the answer was just the thing to do. But when he would teach in France, if any of the students were cheating, it was because when they're taking a test, one would look over the other and start saying, you got that wrong because, right? And instead of working together, it was no, you got to, and it was completely a cultural difference, right? About how they interact, right? And I'm not saying one's bad or the other, but I remember him telling me that. In fact, well, I won't say how old I am, but in many ways, it does show that where you are from and what groups you're from often dictate what you believe is the way that you should address or say things. So there might be more quietness from some groups over others, and you shouldn't bias it. You should just be ready to know that that's going to happen. Okay, I'll just push on. I promise you I'll keep this short because no one wants to listen to me for a long period of time. I like to think about the rethinking of instruction and delivery. And I mentioned that briefly earlier before about web is a dynamic tool, right? So we should be thinking about it as a dynamic tool. All through this session, you've seen people use Jamboard and other sessions where using technology where people can interact and share their thoughts. And it really works best that way, right? So we should often wonder when people say, well, traditionally we've done this. Well, traditionally we had horses and we did charges, right? But in World War II, that didn't work against pillboxes. So we needed to sort of think about what technology happens. And sorry for the sort of morbid thought, but we really need to think about how we're going to apply the best possible use of that technology and deliver. Okay, so, okay, we see it there, right? Avoid long lectures. Don't think I'm going to do a synchronous class or even a high flex class, and it's going to mean we're going to put a camera in front of me and I'm going to lecture for an hour and the people are going to sit there all enthused. And this time they're really going to pay attention, unlike they do in class. Because if you thought they were paying attention in class when they're taking notes on their computer, no, they were probably checking Facebook. Okay, it's just a fact of life. People don't like to sit down for a long period of time and listen to topics that take a lot of mental or cognitive energy. It's just, a fact. So they're not effective in online sessions. And I'd like to even think that they're not really effective in classrooms, right? In fact, it kind of goes back to that passive learning, right? And it's very boring, right? The idea that I'm going to just give you all this information and you're going to parrot it back for the test. Since I have a very long slide set here, I did not cover Father Guido Sarducci's feature, but just Google him and the 5-Minute University afterwards as a homework assignment, and you'll say, oh yes. Okay, so you want to make sure that you don't have long lectures that they have to memorize or anything like that. You don't want that. In fact, this is true of if you're creating an instructional video or even apply it to a webinar. Okay, length matters, right? And it's not what you think. You want it short. You want it short and you want it right to the point, okay? You want to make it so that they can engage with it in small chunks. Some fascinating research has demonstrated that with instructional video, okay, if you have a video that's an instructional video and it's 6 minutes or it's 50 minutes, students will watch it for 6 minutes. So if you make a 50-minute instructional video, you can guarantee they'll watch the first 6 minutes and not pay attention to anything else. So you better say everything they need to know in the first 6 minutes and have otters for the rest, because it's just not going to do anything for you. All right. So that's why you want to think about it in smaller groups. Now, that doesn't mean a 12-minute video won't work, but it better be super engaging. It better be broken up in sections. It might have chapters. You need to do something that'll make the students be able to go back directly to it or know what's going on, or you're going to lose them. And that's just true all the time. All right. It's even true in television. It's true in, if we watch Sesame Street, they didn't have 50-minute bits on how to do reading, right? They had quick little things with Ernie Bert. Now over to someone else, Guy Smiley. I have definitely aged myself in this one, right? I'll let you know that my mother did get me the very first Sesame Street magazine. So now you can figure out my age. Okay. So think about effective presentations. Okay. No one wants to see a talking head video unless you're David Byrne. All right. You can maybe keep people's attention that long, or if anyone remembers Max Headroom, right, from the 80s. All right. Statistics have showed, and actually there's been a lot of research on this, that if they just see your head talking, you're going to lose the engagement of the person, right? In fact, when they start to see those whiteboard animation videos, people will retain the information 20% more than if they did a talking head version of the same content. So use images, use something that gets their attention, change it up a little, make it exciting, change the color once in a while even. It doesn't mean that's the only thing, but at least it gets gets their attention, right? Hopefully I'm tossed out enough different pop culture references that you'll appreciate this, right? But in a previous job that I worked at where I did training for trade compliance, we came up with the idea of the micro lesson, or what we call the Lego of content, right? If you make your content into very tiny bite-sized chunks, okay, you can build anything you want with a Lego. You can make courses that are different, right? And just keep taking the pieces out and moving them around. It's also easier for people to learn if it's in little bite-sized lessons. So try to think about that when you're going to create some sort of learning environment, right? Rethink how you're going to do your synchronous lecture. Can you toss in a bite-sized chunk, have them digest it and do something? Do another bite-sized chunk, have them digest it and do something. This is great, even for example, for people with ADHD or anyone really, because we all don't like to sit for long periods of time. But if you pick up with something going, wow, that was interesting, you might get them engaged and they want to know what the next bite-sized chunk is, because it might be as exciting as the last one that they want to use. So you really want to sort of think about those little bricks, right, of information. And from your perspective, if you ever want to make multiple classes, you could always, if you record that bite-sized chunk, utilize that in some asynchronous course, right? Or use it as a resource. It's easy also to sort of put those into the LMS so that they can access, especially for the students who missed it, right? Quick
David,
question.
we have a quick
Yes?
question before
Oh,
you ask
yes.
your question.
Sure.
David asked if they're using the play function that plays, 2 times as fast. Does that mean we can make the video 12 minutes instead of 6?
I don't know, but that's a good question.
Right?
Because, if they are playing it that fast, the question is, are they digesting the content that fast? Because if I, make them speak like Alvin and the Chipmunks, right, and I speed it up to, does anyone know what number that was on the old records? 78, right? So if you speed it up that fast, I don't know if I'm really digesting the content or just giggling at the voice, right? So, but that's a possible thing. But really, that 6 minutes is something I try to tell everyone, by the way. I often have people want to do intro videos and all, and I say, edit. You can cut it into a couple couple little quick little things, cuts, and just get the meat into it. That's all that really works. And usually try within the first 30 seconds. Within any video, you're going to lose half of your audience within the first minute if it's on YouTube. So first 30 seconds, put in what they're going to learn. That's the hook. Now they'll stay for the rest. So you sort of have to think like an advertiser as an educator. Quick question. Does anyone know what picture this is? The painting? It's a little blue.
Looks like the School of Athens.
Yes. Yes. It's the School of Athens. Right. And you can tell because you have Plato is pointing up for where the forms are supposed to be, right? And Aristotle saying, no, they're in the earth, right? That makes for those philosophy nerds. I had a master's degree in philosophy, so now I'm teaching this. But the point, though, is that we should be using the Socratic method, right? Back then, even, it was don't tell people, lead them, right? So instead of thinking of yourself as the sage on the stage, think of yourself as the guide on the side. Even if you're going to have a synchronous class, think about it as a way of getting people to sort of move themselves along, right? One of the great ways of doing that is to think about flipping your courses and using breakout sessions, right? If you can sort of flip the course so that you provide the content that they can access at any time, and then they're going to go into that session and you're going to discuss it with them and you're going to answer questions about the content. That's going to make them have to be engaged. In fact, that's something that works great in law school. They know they teach with the Socratic method, so that when they go in there, they're going to be like, Ms. Heron, please tell me what they mean by this. Right now, you're going to be on the spot. You're like, I better have read that because I'm going to have to know, right? You want to make sure that the students are engaged. And by flipping the class, it doesn't necessarily mean using breakout sessions, but by at least creating that sort of level of engagement, right? The content really isn't that interesting. I hate to say that, right? We often think that it's us giving that hour lecture that's important that no one else could do, right? But no, what no one else could do is get the students to understand the content and be able to engage them and show them why it's so interesting. I happen to know a geologist who, when I never thought geology was exciting. No one ever showed it to me. Take a walk, and I've learned so much about the Adirondacks and what makes it unique. I embrace it. I'm looking for rocks. I am looking to discover, like, what does it tell me about this area? I didn't know the depth of a river actually tells you what rocks and sediment is underneath it. Now you're like, really? Yeah, a lot. That was exciting to learn because it was taught to me by someone who shows it's exciting to learn and how they can apply it. That's what we need to do as educators, and that will basically work in all forms. So that is one of the things that we need to do. Instead of adopting technology or utilizing it so that it making some people have a hard time engaging with it because they don't have the technology or bandwidth. Instead, we're going to be engaging them by not having to sit there and digest the content. They can download it earlier over a long period of time and just come prepared for that engagement. Okay, I said this multiple times, be flexible, right? Know that they're not going to be able to make their classes. Very important to know that. And even if they have a synchronous class, if you teach HyFlex, many studies have demonstrated, and you might even pay attention to this, those that don't actually make it to the lecture usually don't go to the synchronous session. They take the asynchronous version and then come back to the class, right? So it usually goes classroom, asynchronous, synchronous, right? And there's a reason for that. Sometimes the students, they can't make it. And if we adopt this sort of attitude that we want to address that, we may even notice an uptick in the number of students. We are alienating because their jobs didn't afford them the ability to go that week because they had to cover for someone else. And they can't lose their job because their kids depend on it, right? So if we want to think about how we're accommodating our students, we need to think that flexibility. It's not that the students are lazy or they just want it a different way. We need to accommodate the life factors that are holding them back. Any questions on that? And the value of prep is going to be super fast because I've passed my 45-minute mark, and I don't think anyone wants to talk or listen to me for 45 minutes.
I don't think that there are any questions that you didn't already address.
Okay. Hey, that must mean I'm either boring you to tears or I've covered all the material, and I am going to be Pollyannic and think I have just wowed you with the material so much that there's no questions, but
Go
feel
with that,
free
Dan.
to ask.
Go with that.
Okay, it makes me happier to think that. The value of prep, right? And I keep telling faculty this over and over again, work smarter, not harder. All right, by prepping your courses beforehand and building them such that they don't make you as an instructor have to work twice as hard to accommodate students, you'll be more successful. I know this sounds really strange, but there are several little stages that you can do that will make things work, right? It's the little things that you don't even think about, right? Learn the demographics of your class. Most people don't realize that 1 to 3 students are food insecure, right? Depending on the college, 1 to 3 or 1 in 4 of your students have children, right? Everyone thinks of, a lot of times people sort of think of college students as they think of Animal House from the 80s, right? Except for they're all 18-year-old kids who are partying. This is not the case. The average age in many colleges of your students is 30 years old, right? You have to sort of accommodate that in your mind. You have to think about what are they facing, right? Know the demographics and know about them. Ask about whether or not the bookstore or the library can possibly ship or make digital material available without making the students go to them. I know this sounds strange. Our college campuses may be beautiful, and we may say that they foster this sort of environment, but if you're in a wheelchair or find it very hard to move, it's very daunting to have to go and buy things when you could have them shipped to you. This is not because they're lazy. This is because they don't want to have to go through all of that. Right? We want to make it easier on the student, not sort of make them go through a trial by fire and run a gauntlet in order to pick up 2 books. So we want to make sure that we can find ways of accommodating the students in any way, shape, or form by thinking of this ahead of time, right? And for the most part, think about putting your notes either before or after available, Because again, it's not the content that's so critical, right? That's not what makes us special. What makes us special is that we're good instructors. We encourage and we engage people. We present it in a way that makes them learn. So once you realize that, you're not going to be replaced when you make an asynchronous course and use some artificial intelligence tools. We're just not there yet to make us that digital, right? So the other thing to think about is don't assume, ask. It's such a simple rule, right? Always ask, never make an assumption about someone. You'll be surprised at the information that you will learn, right? Most people, for example, don't know that I paid my way through college as a mechanic. That's something you'd never guess a guy doing this does, right? By the way, I will not help you fix your car, right? But I'm just saying that right now, it surprises people. And occasionally it comes out when I tell people, it's like, oh yeah, everyone knows the Volkswagen Beetle is basically a Jetta framework. Lift the hood and you'll know it's a Jetta underneath, right? And they're like, why is that? And I use that as an example of how everything is a similar framework, but can have a different shell, right? Don't assume about someone, right? Try to understand your students better, right? Anonymously poll them about their access to technology and bandwidth. They don't have to tell you who it is. Just use a tool to get that information. Find out if they have access to the good bandwidth, right? High quality internet. Maybe they don't. And you can then change your lesson plans to accommodate those students. And by not making them tell you directly, they don't feel embarrassed to mention it, right? They can, you can ask even little poll questions. You can make them anonymous and you can use MS Forms. It's very easy. It's a simple link. People can fill in and you can learn about your students and you can make little pivots in your class to accommodate them. You don't have to do it just in the first. You can sort of ask, is there anything, in the past semester that's affecting you that would affect the lesson, right? If all of a sudden one says, yeah, I lost my home, you can think, oh, okay, mental note, think about these things. So you can sort of include that, right? And also always invite the students to privately contact you with concerns over technology or other concerns. You can always say, I can't offer you solutions, but at least I can help accommodate you and maybe give you guidance to who can, right? So those simple things of just asking really go a long way with students, right? Because we're really stronger together, right? If we sort of think of that, when you're building your courses, build the scaffolds so that they'll assist anyone who needs it, right? One of the things that I developed was you can make through various tools, the simple tools of adaptive release, you can basically find whenever a student does poorly on a written work, and then all of a sudden open up sort of tips to how to do better in writing, tips to do better in online discussion. You can offer all these things to students and have it there for them or have it pop up when you might need it. You can offer in your sessions just little tips about crisis hotlines, helps to navigate the course, what it means to be in an online course, because there may be students who are completely new to this and they're overwhelmed by it. If you include all these things up front and develop it in the beginning, when you're doing your synchronous version, it's all there, right? If they know what's expected of them when they're going into the synchronous version, then they're not nervous about what to expect. They're prepared, right? Or they'll do their best to prepare for it. So, if you think about prepping beforehand and accounting for all these sort of possibilities, you'll discover it's going to be easier. These are just the obvious. I'm going to quickly power through too about prep. Your lighting matters. All right. Okay. If you notice, I turned the blinds back because I didn't want to blind you, because the sun would make me a dark figure and I don't want to look like Sauron or some other evil thing. I want to basically, you see me, right? I'm just a guy sitting in his kitchen, actually. Okay. I gave it away. Everyone knows me as the guy next to the plant, right? But, it's just a kitchen eating it. Your lighting's going to matter, right? There's a lot of information about how to have stronger lighting. This is one of the simple things. You don't want it more than 45 degrees in front of you, right? You want to have it in front of you, not behind you, right? And you want to try using the strongest natural light possible. That's really nice. Notice the guy in the picture, definitely not following those rules, right? So it's very hard for students to adapt, really understand you. Just like, again, simple prep. Make sure that you have a good camera angle. Right now I'm using a shoebox, okay? My laptop's on a shoebox, so it looks like I'm looking at a camera. If You don't want these sort of, dramatic angles looking at students. It's disturbing. So instead, try not to do that. They're called Dutch angles for those theater buffs, right? Avoid those. And finally, a simple pair of earbuds can cost $18 on Amazon.com. And they're Bluetooth and they pair with most devices now, right? I'm using one that's 7 years old, but you'll discover that the microphone quality is better than many of the corded ones or the mic that comes with a laptop. So many times we have laptop adoption programs for people who do not have them, but we don't give them the headsets. So then they have a very bad mic and they have a very bad speaker system. So you want to just, if you can get your school to basically adopt affordable versions or tell the students that and they say, oh, I have that with my iPhone. They can pair it. It's going to be a lot better. Notice no cord. I'm like a normal person, right? So, it does make it a little friendlier too. The other thing that's kind of important is, and do as I say, not as I do. Make sure you charge them before you do a session so that you don't have it beeping in the ear saying the battery is running low. Okay. By the way, everyone hearing this, right? Jamie, I see it now. So I'm just making sure because, that would be kind of embarrassing if for the past 30 minutes I was telling you the importance of a mic and you're not hearing the mic. So that's an important thing. All right. Now, I don't have the Morgan Freeman mic. I would like to have that, and so it is. But there you go. And that would be all. So I'm going to, let's see. And it's pretty much going to end that. But I'd love to answer any questions you have, although you probably have more to share than that. Please feel free because I don't have all the answers, but I know that as a community, we definitely can come up with some of the best answers to make it more equitable learning environments.
Thank you so much, Dave. Does anybody have any questions for Dave while we have a couple minutes here?
Yeah, I just wanted to know what is the source for the access slide that you had?
Okay, yeah, that source is from Deutsche Bank. And if you go to the blog on the first slide, can I go to the first slide? Can I go back to the first slide? Oh, come on, can I go back? If you go to the blog from the first slide, that will actually have a list of our references that will include that and a hyperlink to the PDF. So you can have that. I'm just basically reminding you, by the way, that was the first otter. Anyone see what the second otter was?
Oh, I missed
Otter
it.
AI. Otter AI was responsible for Google Meet's live session. I would tell you that my blog's title is easy to remember. It's simply instructional design sccc.blogspot.com, but that is not an easy thing to remember. So I didn't want to pay for a URL. I'm cheap. I use something free. But here it is right here. If you click on it, you'll notice the first, literally the first one there, or use the QR code. The QR code is the easiest. And you can have that. I tried to hyperlink all the references I used as well so that you're perfectly welcome to go check them out. You won't get a reference on the quote about the accessibility. That was from me. I'm hoping that someday that will be a thing now that it's in print. Anyone else?
Well, Bruce just got some brownie points for saying one of these things is not like the otter.
Oh, I'm utterly
Sesame
annihilated on that one. Yes.
Yeah, the QR codes are great.
Mhm.
All right. If nobody has any questions for Dave, we might have a moment to take a networking break before the next session starts and see a little bit of the, oh, that link. Sorry, Steve, I was trying to type it directly from and I obviously made some sort of error when I was typing. It's not uncommon. Instructional design. It's 3 C's.
Yeah, that'd be from Schenectady County Community College. I tried to, give a plug to the college I work at.
There you go.
I also knew it would be free. Right? It's not like, I wonder if someone took that name. So that was a safe one.
All right, well, I'm going to stop the recording